Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sisto Says, powered by Design 2147, a New York City building code and expediting firm. Today I have Matthew Jaworski of Brent Restoration. Matthew, welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me.
We go back a long time ago. We ran into each other. We asked you to come on the show. Glad to have you on. I know you like to listen to Sisto Says, so thank you very much for being a subscriber. But you and I met many, many years ago. You've done some work for us, our company. You've restored our building here in Williamsburg. Thank you very much. And welcome aboard. So if you want to tell us a little bit about what Brend Restoration is doing these days, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you. My name is Matthew Jaworski. I'm the owner of Brent Restoration, a company which specializes in building envelope restoration. I am a licensed safety manager. I'm a licensed special rigger. We've been in business for over 40 years. We specialize primarily in facade restoration, which work is triggered by the local law. It's called Facade Inspection Safety Program, formerly Local Law 10, then Local Law 11. Over the years, we've performed over 1,000 projects on more than 700 buildings.
Wow.
So we've seen it all. We do roofing, we do facade work, stone, terracotta, brick, pointing. People usually say pointing. Pretty much all work from scaffolds, whether suspended scaffolds, supported scaffolds. We do our own sidewalk sheds, we do our own supported scaffolds, and we do our own suspended scaffolds as well.
So very few subs.
Very few subs.
Yeah, that I always remember about your company. And then you run a tight ship.
Thank you.
That I know, and your attention to detail is spectacular across the board, from whether they're drawings, whether they're keeping the site clean and safe, keeping your workers clean and safe. You take a lot of pride in that, and clearly 40 years of being in a business that has a lot of liability with workers being way up in the air. Kudos to you for running a great ship.
Thank you.
So you were here once before. We did part one. I thought we didn't cover enough. I appreciated you being such an incredible subject matter expert. So I'd like for us to continue that. We talked a lot about why laws were put into place. Unfortunately, as you said in the first episode, it has to do with blood. Unfortunately, someone gets hurt. There's a fatality. And the laws change and evolve. So 2030 seems to be the place we're going to pick up from where we left off on the previous episode. So there's changes coming down the road. The next cycle is 2030. So let's start there, and then we'll work our way into some of the other changes or other things that you may have on your mind.
So let's maybe double click on what is a facade project, its mechanics from conception to the finish line.
Perfect.
So there are two things that can trigger a project. One is an unsafe event. So a piece of your facade falls or the crack develops, whomever sees it.
Or someone sees it, right?
Right.
It doesn't have to fall off. Somebody just notices there's a problem.
The DOB can see that, but also every registered professional, so your architect, your engineer, is mandated to report something unsafe that he sees to the building department. The building department then issues immediate order to erect a sidewalk shed, and the owner will have 5 months to file the design plans for the facade work. So whether it's as prescribed in in the law that you do it every 5 years and your cycle comes, you have to do it, or whether it's the condition of your building that develops that you need to do the project. This is one of the two ways how the project
Right. So
can
it's not every
can get
5 years.
triggered.
It could be whenever there's an issue.
Correct. So the building hires registered design professional. It's usually the architect or an engineer to develop the scope of work and a set of plans for the facade and on or envelope project. What we also need to mention is that an unsafe facade may and likely has an impact on the building's ability to borrow money and on building's insurance.
Wow. Never thought of it that way, but it makes sense
So
because it's a liability.
there are cases, and especially on buildings, we talked about the insurance issues in the first part. Some short-sighted building owners were hiring the cheapest contractors in the cycles past who didn't have the proper insurance coverage, and if it led to an accident on site and the contractor having that coverage excluded, it landed in the building's insurance. So now a lot of buildings are in a similar situation to the facade contractors, which is
Their
that
premiums have gone through the roof.
that there's only a few carriers that are willing to write their business, which leads to high premiums
And,
or
and one
very
of
high
them would
premiums.
be, when was the last time you did your facades? Because we don't want to take you on if we have the potential for, if the building has.
If the building has a record of proper insurance subrogation, meaning that you are hiring the contractors and vetting their insurance coverage for the specifics of your project,
Right.
then you have no issue.
Right.
Right.
The
Because
problem
you
is
have-
people get insurance certificates and they don't even know what they're covered for.
Exactly.
And that happens a lot.
Exactly.
They're
So-
like, woohoo, I got an insurance certificate. Great. But you're doing roofing, but he's not a roofing contractor.
But this world is mostly in the past, because right now the insurance has gotten to so many buildings
Right.
that all of the major managements, they vet your policy. They have special crews to vet your policies.
Correct.
And really, this business of hiring the cheapest contractor has mostly gone away.
Yes.
People know that they need to vet your insurance before they hire you. And if they don't know, and
They
by
will know.
and by code, if you have a neighbor, most likely you're going to have to protect the neighbor.
Right.
The neighbors are going to want to
which-
vet your insurance
Well, and
because it can slip
that's
to
a great
them.
point that you bring up. One of the biggest thing that's holding up our projects right now, especially, we file a lot of facade projects because we work for universities that own lots of buildings in Manhattan. They're not on one big site. There's a building here, building there. And a lot of them, we need licensing agreements to be on the neighbor's roof or in their backyard. And believe it or not, that slows us down. And one of the things that we've realized is that we file a project and during the schedule, we build in 6 months and say, okay, well, we could do all of this, but you better have a license when we're back there by that point. If not, we're going to have to stop, and our general conditions are going to go up, our cost is going to go up, and that won't be a problem until you go next door and you start talking to the neighbor, and the neighbor wants insurance, wants this, their attorney. It becomes a problem. So licensing agreements have slowed the process down, Matthew. It's not easy to get on your neighbor's building. The law says they must let you on, but you have to adhere.
Trust me, I learned it the hard way. So the code mandates that under certain circumstances, you need to protect the neighbor's roof. And so there's many yardsticks to it. The first one being that you're working at the height that's equal or more to have the distance that
Away
you're
from
away
them,
from your neighbor's roof. Or if you're simply 4 feet or more above your neighbor's roof, you need to protect 20 feet
Out.
from the property, 20 feet out. So in some occasions, it's the roof where the building department and the code has a prescribed 2-inch insulation, 2-inch plank, 3/4 inch, all non-combustible materials.
What happened to the rubber tires?
However, on many occasions, these are the rec spaces that people use.
Right.
These are terraces.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to lose them, or if it's a tenant, they want to be compensated for it. So there's a lot of moving pieces that go into negotiating an access agreement for protection. In some instances, when it's not over the roof, when it's over a paved area like a courtyard, you can prescribe what's called a controlled access zone, meaning that your neighbor will control access to that zone so nobody goes into
During working hours.
into the cone of danger. It's not even during working hours because the code doesn't recognize working hours or non-working
wow.
hours. So technically, this controlled access zone should be maintained at all times.
Wow.
And if the specific area is second means of egress,
Sure.
it cannot be controlled access zone. Then you need
absolutely.
overhead protection.
Right.
The
Then you'd
code
have to
provides for
Right.
overhead protections in alleyways and spaces that are not necessarily public, that are in the rear of the buildings. So in some cases, you cannot have a controlled access zone. You need overhead protection.
Understood.
But this has become one of the biggest obstacles in either commencing work or work proceeding in an uninterrupted
if you really think
way.
about it, before when Local Law 10 first came out, it was just a front facade. We didn't have to deal with that. Now we're dealing with the entire perimeter of the building, because if they're building shorter than yours, you have to deal with that facade. If you behind you, you got to deal with that. You got someone to your left, same thing, they're building shorter than yours. Well, now you got to deal with 4 facades where before you used to deal with 1 and only worry about that. So the whole licensing agreement, the protection plan, we had a job where it was an office building that we were going to put an amenity space onto the roof. They were going to spend $30 million. We were in litigation for 2 years.
I've seen those.
We finally abandoned the project. They said, we can't just keep spending money. This is crazy. So they decided not to do a rooftop amenity. We did an interior amenity space, but they lost out on the rooftop. Why? Because of the logistics of dealing with multiple condo owners. So it wasn't you were going to a building, you were going to 3 different private owners that you had to protect their terrace, not
And
for
they
a
may
month.
have different requirements of what they want to have done.
And they had different attorneys, and they would go to court, and they'd file another complaint. So before you knew it, it was harder to get the agreements, and we couldn't do the job without their agreements.
Yep.
You know, so they decided, okay, well then we'll find another way.
Well, the good news is that there was a recent change in law that Kathy Hochul signed, which should make this process easier. I'm going to leave it to another guest of yours to explain the changes and
It sounds
and
like
how it may improve getting access.
Okay. So when we talk about, you being on the, not only president of Brent Restoration, but you've also dabbled in development. You helped us with a project that we privately developed. I'm sure you've developed some stuff on your own office, your own this, your own that. And, a lot of times our biggest delay is the minute, a lot of times we have to, as code consultant and entitlement expediters, we have to explain to people, to architects, to engineers, to homeowners, that there's this imaginary line that separates your property from your neighbor. The minute you leave your property line, it is a civil matter. It's not a building code matter anymore. So whether you're going to dig underneath your foundation to underpin or touch your neighbor's property, touch their foundation, that seems to be a major delay for us. Because a lot of times the team isn't educated with getting those licensing agreements. B, they don't understand how could they stop me to build. No, the law says they can't stop you, but you have to go through courts. You have to get an injunction.
Exactly.
You have to make it fair and reasonable offer to rent whatever you're renting. So all of those things come into play. And I'm sure, especially in the facade envelope world that you're in, those delays can be quite costly. So tell us a little bit about how you run into those and what you do with those.
So this is probably the number one biggest delay source of any other sources. Other than erecting the sidewalk shed in front of adjacent property, so by law, when you have to work on your facade, if your building is shorter than 100 feet tall, you have to install the sidewalk shed along your property plus 5 feet
right.
overhang onto the
And as
neighboring
it gets
property.
taller, it's got to go wider.
And as you exceed 100 feet, you need this extension to be 20 feet.
Right.
This extension is as of right, so you can install it on a public sidewalk in front of your neighbor's property without any license agreement. They cannot stop you. Obviously, if this neighbor is also a case where you have to protect his roof, then you want to talk to him about it.
Right. You don't want to put the shed up first.
Being neighborly, you may want to notify him anyway. Hey, I'm doing my facade work. I have a 20-foot extension, sidewalk shed extension that I have to erect by law. So I'm giving you a heads up, I'm going to do it. Once you have to protect him, usually it also comes in as one of the items into your license agreement. And like you've said, there are cases that people have been negotiating license agreement for 2 years.
Right.
And it's holding up a portion of the work, sometimes the entire project. So this is the biggest source of delays, and hopefully it's going to improve with the changes in law.
And the part about the delays that I like to share is delays are incredibly costly. Insurance, you're going to be on the job longer. You're starting and stopping, you lose momentum. You price the materials out for January of 2027, but you didn't start the job till January of 2028. Who's picking up that difference? The brick was X per square foot. A year later, Brend goes to buy it. It's now Y per square foot. The impact, the general conditions, the length of the shed, just everything, just so that I always say that there can be a better way. There can be a better way. And hopefully through some new laws and some new things that there'll be a better path with some least resistance. But definitely the license agreements are a big issue. But while we've been talking a little bit about all of these things, I do want to, and maybe I'm going to catch you off guard here, Matthew. So if I am, just looking for your opinion. One of the things that I think that's changed is I think product has gotten a lot better. I remember when you came and did our roof many years ago, you're like, nah, we don't put that around the ductwork anymore. We use this German product. We use this. And I was always amazed that you and your team were very much on the cutting edge of a lot of products that were used in Europe that were far superior to what we had here in the US, and that eventually those products became available. They were more expensive, but they lasted a lot longer. Tell us a little bit about, is a brick still a brick? Is a block still a block? Some people say blocks aren't the way they used to make block. They're not as solid. They're lighter. They're this. They're that. So tell us a little bit about the evolution of the product and how that's either helped or hindered what you guys do on the envelopes.
So the products are definitely getting better, and they're getting they're getting better faster in certain trays. While the brick is still a brick, the block is still a block. The terracotta piece that was installed 100 years ago and needs to be replicated today, it's still that terracotta. It's terracotta, by the way, can only be fabricated in the U.S. in two places. Only two companies fabricate terracotta.
Sounds like a monopoly to me.
One is called Boston Valley Terracotta, which is upstate New York. The other one is Gladding McBean, which is in California. And this is the company I work with exclusively. It actually pays to have all your eggs in one basket in case of terracotta because you have more relationship and more jobs together mean you communicate better. So I encourage everyone to look up Gladding McBean on YouTube, and there's many videos of how the product is done, and that product is done exactly the same way it's been done 100 years ago. Yes, they have better furnaces, more control over temperature.
Right. Well, they
but
probably
it's
have
the
better
same
quality
clay.
control, but it's the same process.
Correct. And the challenge of replicating terracotta is that terracotta shrinks in the kiln by about 10%. So when you get a piece that you need to replicate, now you need to build a model that is 10% larger.
Right, and hope it shrinks to that same size.
Exactly.
Because if you're off a little bit and you got hundreds of feet of it, by the time you get to the end, never going to fit.
Right. The pieces have too much. And there's also development in this avenue of the business. I'm proud to say that we've talked to Gladding McBean for many years. And in 2023, on one of our projects on Riverside Drive, we actually made it a goal not to ship old fragments of terracotta to California, but rather to scan them on site.
Oh, wow.
So Gladding McBean brought in University of Wisconsin, and with their help, developed a photogrammetry process that enabled to document the units in a way that the models could be made in California without
shipping the product.
shipping the product.
So that's where like technology
That's where
comes.
technology.
The biggest thing that I remember, and again, I'm not in the facade world, just a code consultant and an expediter, right? That the waterproofing products, the just all of them, whether they're liquid, whether they're a stick-on, whether it's dense glass with a certain type of rubberized, how they breathe better, how they push the water away, how they're not eaten up by the UV as much as they used to. It seems that the bricks are still bricks and the terracottas are still the terracotta, but the membrane world has really taken a quantum leap. Is that accurate?
So this is where there's been the most advancement. We've gone away from tar-based products, and in compliance with low VOC laws, there's been less and less solvent-based chemicals used, and at the same time, the products have evolved into sort of one-way membrane. It's sort of like Gore-Tex, that it doesn't allow water to get in, but lets the vapors out.
Yep.
And obviously, this vapor permeability is going to be limited to stop the water, but those products are getting better and better. Simple window sealant. There's window sealants today that you can get 20 years warranty from the manufacturer.
Right.
So we used to think of sealants like a 5-year maintenance cycle.
Like a piece of like silicone. It's only going to last a certain time.
And today they last 20 years and you can warranty them for 20 years. So there's no question that in every avenue of construction where the products are based on chemicals, there's been a great advancement in technology. So
Well,
it's coating, paints,
Yes.
membranes.
A really good friend of mine, personal friend. He's also a roofing contractor, and he does big projects like yourself, but strictly waterproofing roofing, and parapet masonry, but most of his business is roofing. And we spend a lot of time together, so we're always talking construction. And he gets called on other people's roofs, and he says the biggest issue is workers and companies not following product standards. He goes, almost every leak that he goes to, it's not the product that fails, it's the installation that fails. They take a shortcut, they're not paying attention, they do it fast, they got to get it done. Sometimes it's their own workers saying, oh, my boss isn't around, I just got to get this done because I want to get out of here. And they don't adhere to the standards of the product, but the product doesn't fail. It's the way they installed it where the failure comes. So I know your company. I know how proud you are of the products that you are a rep of, that these manufacturers want Brend Restoration to go do their product, to install their products, because you adhere to those standards. And if you adhere to those standards, those warranties will last now, because they don't pick a 20-year warranty on a caulking for a window. They do it to make sure that they can back it and you install it the way they say. Because if you don't do it the way they say, they're not going to back it anymore. Yeah. So I think that a lot of what we see when we hear of facades leaking and we hear of roofs leaking, it's not, a lot of times it's not the product. It is the control of how they installed it.
Right. So few points on this. One, and the most important, we should not think about roofing and facade. Building envelope is a one system,
right?
And the components of this system have to work together.
You got to stop the water coming in from everywhere.
Exactly. And you have to make sure that the facade waterproofing and your roofing work together to stop that water, that you don't have a gap where they meet.
Right.
Roofing has evolved from 30 years ago. You would have a kettle on the roof and you would be heating tar and then smearing this tar and sticking the roofing paper into this tar. Today, roofer is a chemist.
Yeah.
He's mixing chemicals and he's applying the liquid that's either non-smelly at all to very low odor, and the roof can now be applied in a much more free way where the overlap is not necessarily as important as it used to be, because upon curing, the chemicals create one uniform membrane.
Well, and they have, the product themselves have evolved.
The products evolved and changed completely from tar-based product to a bunch of like a small chemist set. However, the details have also evolved, and the details are more complicated than they used to be. So there needs to be certain training. And in addition to training, what the manufacturers do is the manufacturers themselves, if they will warranty your roof,
right.
So the most desirable type of roofing warranty is what's called NDL, no dollar limit warranty, which you can have for 20 years, 25 years. However, to get that warranty, the manufacturer has to get you a letter of assembly for your system.
Yep.
Which usually the architects are knowledgeable to issue the specifications in the same line.
And they issue it in the spec to make sure that you know that they're going to issue this, and you know that you need to follow their standards. If not, they're never gonna issue that.
Exactly. So before you start the project, you need to register the project,
right.
And the manufacturer will send their inspector on certain phases of the project
to make sure you're compliant,
to inspect the progress.
Correct.
Right? Because once you cover it, many things you can't see. So they want to see the steps in between, which is only makes sense.
No different than doing your special inspections while you're doing your clips on your facade or whatever you're doing. You know, these controlled inspections allow for quality control, right? To make sure that every bolt is right, every connection is made properly. So product has changed a lot. And again, I think, like you said in the previous show, there's still the human element. There's still a person that has to mix the chemicals. There's still somebody that has to apply it. It's not robotic. It still needs attention. It still needs training. It still needs all of these things. We're not in the point in our lifetime where we're going to send a robot up there and they're going to, be mixing these things and giving it to the worker. We're still in the day of you still got to measure and you still got to know what you're doing.
In the age of AI, a construction worker is definitely a lot more sheltered from a job loss perspective than other industries, maybe.
But it's evolving. I was on a job site the other day where a gentleman told me that they have 10,000 square feet of flooring, of like a tile. The gentleman who's running the robot was like an executive PM. I want to say like an exec PM. He was an installer and then he became like in charge of a crew. And then from a crew, he became in charge of multiple jobs. And now he's like one of the VPs of the company. And him and another gentleman came with a robot. The robot, after all the walls are roughed out, comes in and literally does a shop drawing of every tile and makes it a jigsaw puzzle with lasers. And he says, every room comes on a pallet. Every tile is numbered. And we bring them up, we roll them in that room, and we do that room. No cutting, no tools other than a trowel and thin set.
We definitely have progress in things like this more than so in pre-construction and procurement phase more than in actual construction, right? Other than the development in products, we still need humans to come in and install them, and they need to be trained, have knowledge, experience, and so on.
Well, they got to meet the standards that we just talked about.
But let me go back to, because for your property managers and building owners, I wanted to get a timeline of a construction project.
Sure.
And we started with the biggest source of delays for the neighbor access agreement. So it's become practice in my office that 24 hours from the job award, we notify the clients which neighbors we're going to have to protect, because that's potentially the longest lead item that they will need.
And the biggest part of that is, number one, it sends the message that you're on your game, right? Hey, this is our schedule. We need access to this. We're letting you know now because we know it's a problem. We do the same thing. Someone calls us up and says, we want to file this. The first thing we tell them is, oh, do you have a SWIFT plan for your stormwater drainage? And they're like, well, it takes 6 months to get it approved. But we didn't even talk about the project yet. But we're letting you know that right here, this is your long lead item. So absolutely.
So right after we notify the owner which neighbors we're going to have to protect to start the process, we go into the filing process of temporary access. So sidewalk shed, supported scaffold, suspended scaffolds. There can be multiple permits and different permits within each category needed for the project.
Correct.
That will take time because sometimes we submit our plans and DOB has objections, so it's a little back and forth. Then if the building is taller than 15 stories, we will need a site safety plan. So we're filing the site safety plan. And we also need to file the tenant protection plan.
Right.
This is all in addition to your architect just filing the job.
Right. We could file the facade project. We get facade jobs all the time. And most of the architects, they'll self-certify them because there's really... But the biggest concern is the tenant protection.
The site safety.
Site safety plan, the sheds and the scaffold, because that's all the... But the detailing and the facade, Oh, okay. Well, we showed 150 square feet of brick removal. Once we open it, we need 300. We file an amendment.
Right.
A couple of days, you could get that through. But your part of it of getting all of those other items related to tenant protection, site safety and all of that. That's where the meat of how you're going to do the job gets approved. What's shown on the architect's drawings is just scope,
Right, right.
and detailing.
And those create dependency. In other words, I cannot pull my work permit until my site safety plan has been approved.
Of course. So, and then you get the site safety plan. You get all that together. A lot of back and forth, special inspections, plans, asbestos report. Go through everything. Now you got your permit. So here we are. You go back to the building owners in the manual and say, okay, I got my permit. Okay, when can you start? Well, I can only work on the front facade because we don't have any.
Exactly.
We have nothing to do on the other sides because you don't have your licensing agreements.
But even this timeline that we just described of filing the temporary access with the site safety, it's a minimum of 2 months and sometimes
easy.
4 months.
Sure.
So if you give me a job, I'm not going to start tomorrow. I may be starting 4 months from now.
Well, no, I'm going to say something different. You start at the very second because for the first 4 months, you're planning, you're maneuvering, you're thinking, you're helping them, you're assisting them. They're coming back with questions. You're going back. You're really putting the whole strategy into place in those few months. And there's a lot of moving parts.
But when the client asking me, when are you
can
starting,
start?
they're thinking, when am I setting foot on the job site?
Right. But like us, we may not file a job for 6 months, but we're working for 6 months to get to that day for you to give us your plans and actually give it to the city. For 6 months, we've been talking code, zoning, logistics.
If you're affecting MTA, if you're affecting parks.
Monitoring, this, that, and there's so many other things. One of the big things right now that's come into play is monitoring.
Yeah.
Monitoring's become a big thing. You go to all the expos, you'll see 30 different vendors trying to sell you monitoring. 30 years ago, you went there. The only people that monitored was the TA. Now you got to monitor your neighbor's building, and it needs to be over here, and this and that, and
now
then
you're monitoring
requirements.
TPP.
Right. You got to need somebody on site every once a week to make sure your egresses are open. There's people living in the building. So there's a lot of things to consider. And Matthew, you and I, we could talk about this all day long because we love it. I know you love it. I love it. But as the same on part one, as we wrap up part two, always looking ahead, never looking behind. Do you think that on the life safety side that things are going to continue to evolve and be more stringent? Or you think they have it at a pretty good place right now?
So I think we're at a pretty good place. I think we'll be evolving as the technology is evolving, just like we're now crossing on to the electronic document keeping, record keeping on the job site from paper documents. So with any events that would expose any gaps we have, the law is going to change, as well as technology is going to develop, which means that it's going to be easier, at least for the record keeping. However, I think that we need to allow for more development in the soft cost. So in the years back, there was no site safety, or the site safety necessarily wasn't in effect. The plans were easier. You could file a boilerplate sidewalk shed. Today, the sidewalk shed has to be specifically designed.
Yeah, we used to years ago, we used to see the same drawing on every job.
Yeah. So years ago, your soft cost in the project was maybe 10%.
Yeah, now it's a lot higher.
Today is at least 10%. And I see some projects, and partly because of certain owners did not change their mentality, and the mentality used to be, let's do the minimum and defer and we'll do minimum again and the minimum again. So I've had project where the soft cost exceeds 50%. So the owner puts in less than 50 cents of every dollar into the improvement of their property.
Right.
And in
Which it
today's
should be the other way around.
it should be the other way around. If you've paid for your access, your site safety, you should put in as much work
Sure,
into
because
your
next
building.
time you do it again, you're going to pay for it again.
Exactly.
So it actually costs you more in the long run.
And this money for compliance, while needed, is not the money that goes into the improvement of your property.
Amazing. Well, I have to say, spending 2 shows with you, Matthew, this has been incredibly educational. You know, I'm a big proponent of Brent Restoration.
Thank you.
I think that, you know, I never use the podcast as an infomercial for anybody, but I do recognize colleagues that run a great business, that do great work, that take the time out to understand all the pieces and the detailing. Your company has always been top notch for that, and it's very easy for me to say that I know you and your company.
Thank you. So I think for building owners, property managers, I think they need to implement some of the KYC that the banks implement. So know your client. When you hire a contractor, you have to know him. Vetting insurance is one. Is the owner a special rigger, right? Because many companies will rent a license
Right.
to do the work. What is the safety track
I was about
of
to
your
say,
company?
what's their safety track exactly? And actually, might be a little old school, but on all our new proposals, I always put references in, and I encourage our clients to call if it's a university project and we're working for NYU and we may be doing something at Pratt. I encourage the person from Pratt to call somebody at NYU and say, hey, you've worked with design. What do you think? How do they work? Do they meet your standards? Are they, whatever it is? And I think it's old school, but I think that that's important, because if another building owner who has a similar project as yours and says, well, I worked with Matthew and his team and they were exceptional, that speaks volumes. And that's just old school. Just pick up the phone and call somebody or send
And people
somebody
do this.
And people do it, and they should. But as always, a pleasure, Matthew.
Thank you.
Looking forward to part 3 and 4 in the near future. So we're going to have you back again, but thanks for coming in.
Thank you.